Hello and welcome to my latest video. In this I'm going to be showing you how to replace the turbo on a 2008 Freelander 2 TD4. This is the old turbo that I've taken off the car. I've purchased a new Garrett replacement, Land Rover part number there. You can get your own turbo, your old turbo, reconditioned for about half the price of a new one, but as I was going to trouble doing this myself, I thought I would buy new instead. You will also need various bolts and gaskets as part of the process, which I'll run through later in the video. But I think if we now head under the car, I'll show you how to start the process.
So the first thing I'm going to do underneath the car is remove the air pipe work that goes from the turbo to the intercooler. There's a couple of Jubilee clips at the top there with the rubber hose which connects to the bottom of the turbo, and then the pipe work runs across underneath the engine to the front, and then there's another Jubilee clip just to remove behind the front bumper. So we'll get that out of the way first, and bring you back after that. So having removed the steel pipe between the turbo and intercooler, the rubber elbow hose that goes directly into the turbo can be accessed from the driver's side wheel arch. You can see the Jubilee clip there in the centre of my shot, so I'm going to remove that next. A bit more space. One suggestion when you've got these various bits of pipe work off is to give them a check over any splits or tears. They are renowned for failing on the car. I'd say I've been quite lucky so far. The one to the throttle body had gone, mainly because somebody had replaced it with the incorrect pipe. But this one here looks okay actually at the moment, which is quite good news. So that's the intercooler pipe work removed and reassembled as a piece. There's a bracket on the front which takes an 8mm spanner or socket. The bolts come out there, and then there's a 13mm nut you have to remove, which is fixes it to the bracket that holds the power transfer unit on. So within the engine bay itself, you need to remove the wipers, the plastic scuttle panel below the windscreen, the air intake pipework and the filter housing, and then the metal panel that sits at the back of the engine bay. If you look at my EGR replacement video, you'll see how that's done. And then the next thing I want to do is take the air intake pipe out from the turbo. So there's a bolt at the top here, and then there's some pipes clipped on the side about midway down, and there should just then be a Jubilee clip at the bottom. So I'll bring you back once I've got that off. So this is within the driver's side wheel arch. You can see the intake pipe work coming down, Jubilee clip in the background there. Release that from within the wheel arch, and then that just pulls out towards the right hand side, towards the wheel arch itself. Just be careful, there'll be some waste oil in there potentially, and then we should better just pull that up through the engine bay, I guess. So this is within the driver's side wheel arch again, with that pipe removed. You can then see in the centre of my shot that the torch is shining. There's another spring clip to be removed there, a bit like between the filter housing and the air intake pipe work on top of the engine, those nasty clamp it together jobs. That then allows that rubber extension piece to be removed, sort of collar if you like. I think what I'll also do is remove, see there's a cable in the middle of my shot at the moment, slightly getting in the way. That's to the turbo actuator, which you can just see now in the centre of my shot there. So I need to remove that clip. You just push in on the two ends of that, and it should just then detach itself from the actuator, and that'll allow me to get that cable out of the way, which will make life a little bit easier. So I actually found with the actuator clip, you can See in the centre of my shot there, it's actually easier to come at it from above. What I did was I pushed one side in at a time and very, very carefully with a screwdriver just teased it away on each side. As you push one clip in, you ease it a little bit, go to the other side, push the clip, ease it a little bit, and that then allowed it to withdraw. I tried doing it from below just with my hand, but it's too tight to get it off. Now back within the driver's side wheel arch, that's the connector for the turbo actuator. I've decided to try and take all of this loom up to the top of the engine, because looking from below I'm a bit worried that part of it looks like it's got in contact with one of the I think it's one of the pipes from the to the EGR cooler, and it looks like it's melted the shroud somewhat, so I'm a bit concerned as well not the wires are damaged within it. So I'm going to take this up to the top of the engine to check it out. The only other bit that this wiring loom links to is the crank position sensor, which is by the pulley alternator belt there. So I've undone that clip, and there's also then a sort of oval clip that clamps that wire to the engine block. So I've taken that off as well. There's then a circular clip here that holds the turbo actuator wiring to this piece of pipework, and then I should then be able to pull that cable up to the top of the engine bay. And that's that wiring loom up and out of the way, and you'll see the bit I'm worried about. It's just there where it's gone through the shroud. I don't think there's any damage to the wires. I think they're okay. I'll cut that shroud back later on as part of the process and re-wrap it, and just make sure that there's not a problem there. And it was touching on the braided hose that you can see in the centre of my shot there. So a word of caution. Sooner or later that would have melted through and caused me all sorts of grief. So that's with the rubber shroud or linking piece removed from the turbo impeller. You can see the impeller in the end there. There does seem to be a bit more lateral movement in that than I would have thought, so it would be a good idea to be doing a replacement. And then the rubber piece itself. So as I say, there's a spring clip on one end nearest the turbo, and then a Jubilee clip on the outer. Again, I've had a good check of that, and can't see any splits or holes in that, which is good. So just giving it a bit of a clean up, be ready for reuse on the new turbo. So jumping back on top of the engine now, we need to remove the EGR cooler. So we need to take this bracket off here as the next step, which is again is part of what's holding the loom that goes down to the actuator and the crank position sensor. So I'm going to strip that back. Also take the cam position sensor off as well, just so I can get this wiring completely over the side of the engine bay and out of the way. There's a plug clip to undo there. So we'll do that next and then see how we go after that. So that's with the that wiring loom moved out of the way. Far side of the bay there. Interesting, I've got a bit of oil leaking out of the PCV valve there, or cam cover, what do you want to describe it as. Not sure whether that's significant or not. So we'll get to the point now where we can see the top of the illustrious EGR cooler. Straighten that, I've got to take that off again, having only just done it recently, but there we are. I'm assuming the turbo is going to come up from below, but it looks a bit tight. Carry on with the EGR cooler removal. So I've removed the EGR valve and cooler, and I've also removed the cam cover, PCV valve cover, what would you like to describe it as, at the back. The reason being, it's very hard to see the bolts for the turbo without that off. So as you see the top of the exhaust manifold there, and those 3 bolts, or bolt heads, that's what's holding, or doing the bulk of the work of holding the turbo on. And you can't see those at all easily with the PCV valve in place. So I've taken that off, which I need to do anyway, because it's a fair bit of oil was leaking around the gasket to that, so need to decide what to do about that. I've covered over the diesel injector pipes, and I've just packed out the openings with some blue roller at the moment, but I'll cover that over a bit better before I leave it. So I'm going to get in there now and apply some penetrating oil to these, although how successful that will be I don't know from the top. The other things we need to remove are this clamp here for the exhaust, turbo here, exhaust to the right as you look at the image. They talk about removing the catalytic converter. I'm going to just try initially and see whether I could just move it far enough to the right to clear the way, rather than necessarily taking the whole thing out, but we'll see how we go with that. And then there's another bolt that holds the turbo on from below, which I need to access and spray. It'd be good if I could set the camera up here, but I'm not sure how easy that's going to be to do that. So I'll bring you back at the next stage. So the exhaust clamp's fairly straightforward. That's just a 10mm spanner to undo the nut at the back here. We'll see how that, need a bit of persuasion to shift it once you've got the nut undone. Could do with a bit of a tap, I think. Might get my rubber mallet in there and just give that a bit of a gentle persuasion, I think. I've got the nut off. Just give that a bit of a nudge and see how that goes. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I just gave it a bit of a tap with the rubber end of the screwdriver, and that's enough just to free it off. So that's pretty straightforward. And we need to see whether or not I can get the exhaust to move a little bit with the next stage. I'll try and take that clamp off.
So with the bracket loosened, or the clamp loosened, I can then move the exhaust far enough, hopefully, to clear the turbo. There's a gasket in there that I need to be mindful of, so I think I'll probably try and extract that next on the clamp, and then probably see about trying to loosen some of the turbo bolts. So this is now the view from below. What I've done is I've taken the exhaust mount rubber off this front clip and then just placed a block of wood between the prop shaft and the exhaust, just to keep it out the way. You don't need to apply much pressure, just to move that across slightly. And then you can see there the loose bracket in the centre of my shot where my torch light is shining. The end of the turbo there. The gasket is just in the end of the turbo. It sort of sits around the flange of the turbo itself. So I'll leave that in place for the moment. You can also see the bottom of my shot when the torch is shining there, the oil feed return pipe, so I've got to remove that. Trying to get to those bolts might be interesting. And then the other bolt which holds the turbo on, again, is where my torch light is shining, where that metal bracket sort of dog legs round there. There's a bolt just within that bracket, which I think might be the most difficult one to get to at the moment. So let's see how we go. So with the oil return pipe on the underside of the turbo, I found I could get to that. I'm lying directly underneath the car at the moment, and then reaching round from the wheel arch side above the subframe, and I could just about get, because these are Allen keys, just about get an Allen on there with a small 1/4 inch drive socket, and then the same on the far side there, although it's very awkward to get to. You can only move the ratchet, you know, a couple of clicks at a time, but they freed off pretty quickly, so I'm hoping to do the rest of it just with fingers. It might pay you to take although it's a bit of a faff, to take the drive shaft off, and then the bracket that holds the drive shaft onto the, or the sort of linking bracket between that and the power transfer unit, because I think that'll give you a bit more space. And I may yet end up doing that. I'm hoping now I can ease these out with finger pressure, and certainly that one's coming. They were only really pinched up, to be fair. So although it's a pain to get to, you haven't got to apply much pressure to get them to crack off. I'll carry on with that, and then bring you back after that. So once you've got those two Allen bolts out of the way, this teases away quite nicely from the underside of the turbo. It's got a reasonable bit of flex on it. You see there's a rubber section to the return pipe that allows you a bit of flexibility. I'm just going to put another disposable glove over this pipe, just to try and avoid any rubbish falling down inside it, and then we'll see about getting some of the other bolts off. So in terms of the other bolt underneath the car, hopefully you can see what I've done there. I've managed to get a socket on with an extension piece from the passenger side. It's a bit of a fiddle. I had sprayed that bolt liberally with penetrating fluid for a few days, and actually it's cracked off really easily, so that should come away okay. I'd like to be able to video it, but there's just nowhere really to support the camera, unfortunately. So I'll bring you back once I've got that bolt out. So back on top of the engine, I've got the 3 bolts out through the exhaust manifold. The one that's left in there at the moment I took out and then reinstalled just to hold it for the moment. They all came out fairly well. This back one was quite tight and it's quite hard to get penetrating fluid on that one. You can't really see it from below where the threads poke out through the bottom of the exhaust manifold. So I just kind of sprayed behind the turbo and hoped that some of that would find its way onto the threads. So it's quite a careful process with that one. So it's really just held on by that bolt on the right hand side that you see there. So the next stage is to remove the oil feed pipe, and you'll see in the centre of my shot there the Torx headed banjo bolt and the pipe coming up from the engine block side. So I need to remove that, cover that pipe over and try and retrieve, there's a couple of washers there, because Land Rover tell me you can't buy the washers or a replacement banjo bolt without buying the pipe, which I didn't really want to do. So I'll try and loosen that off and we'll see where we go from there. So as you can see from this shot, I've managed to get a 1/4 inch drive socket on there, and it cracked off fairly easily. So that's going to come out of there fine. Just need to make sure, as I say, that I catch. There should be a washer on top and below the oil feed pipe, so I'm just going to make sure I don't drop those. So I've now successfully dropped the turbo. I've put a load of padding down to the bottom there so I could lower it gently down. I've then got to try and manoeuvre it out. I'm hoping I can fit it through the tunnel there in the background, but we'll see how we go with that. You can just see the oil feed pipe. The oil return pipe should be out of the way. I just need to check that next to make sure that's not trapped in any way underneath. So I'll bring you back once I've seen whether I can manoeuvre it backwards. So I'm still not yet convinced this is going to be the right route, but I've moved the turbo further back, lifting it from above within the engine bay towards the tunnel. I'll now head underneath and see whether I can wrangle it out through that gap. So I'm pleased to report that that is the way to remove it, bring it back through the tunnel. There is enough space between the prop shaft and the tunnel itself to angle it through. So happy days. So stage 1, turbo removed. So I just thought I'd bring you back underneath and give you a view with the turbo removed. So it connects on in the centre of my shot there, to the underside of the exhaust manifold. The exhaust itself, you can see the temperature sensor in the top there, and the clamping bracket that goes on the side of the turbo. So yeah, just thought I'd give you a shot of that. So I just thought I'd give you a quick overview of the new and the old turbo together, and the extra bits and pieces that I've bought to go alongside it. So I've got a new metal gasket that goes between the turbo and the exhaust. I've then got a new gasket which goes between the turbo and the exhaust manifold. Interestingly, my old turbo didn't seem to have that installed. Part number for that. And then obviously replacement bolts. So these are the bolts that go between the exhaust manifold and the top of the turbo, 3 of those, and then the smaller bolt which goes through the bracket at the bottom of the turbo. Part number there. So next stage, see about getting it manoeuvred in under the vehicle. Apologies, I missed a section here, which is basically
reaching down from above within the engine bay, lifting the turbo up, and then dropping on the gasket between it and the exhaust manifold before inserting a single bolt just to hold the turbo in place while I continue with the rest of the install.
Now, another important part of the process recommended is to replace the oil feed banjo bolt, and importantly the associated filter that sits inside that bolt, which is quite a fine mesh, so I need to ensure that that's going to give a nice flow of oil through to the turbo. So the part number for the filter is that, and for the bolt itself is that. So I'll show you next where that's located. It's in a bit of a tricky position on the back of the engine block above the power transfer unit. I'll try and get my camera in there next to show you where that bolt is. And it takes a 17mm spanner. So this is looking from within the driver's side wheel arch, and you can see the oil feed pipe angling down there below the turbo support bracket, and that's the power transfer unit below. So we need to get a 17mm spanner on there. I did think it was going to be too difficult to get at, but thanks to Germ Plus on the off-road group Facebook page, who's gave me a few pointers as to how to undo that. Basically, I thought we'd have to take the power transfer unit out, but he said he managed it without. So I'm going on his advice, and we'll see if I can get a spanner on there and get that loosened off. So I have to say that was quite a tricky process. I managed to get a ring spanner on it, and then reach down from within the engine bay and lock another ring spanner onto that one in order to crack it off. I think I probably made my life difficult because I've obviously left the section of exhaust on. I think if that wasn't in the way, you might find it a bit easier. And then once you've got it loosened off, I then reached in through the driver's side wheel arch and undid it with my fingers. Make sure you've got something underneath, because you're going to lose a bit of oil when it does come out. And then filter wise, job to tell whether or not that's particularly clogged in any way, but it's a good idea to replace it. So I'll put the new bolt and filter together and try and get that back on. So one thing I have had to do with the new bolt is to swap over the sealing washer, because Land Rover don't know when they're going to be able to get those in. So I've had to reuse the old one. So that's a new bolt with the new filter in place. So I'll now go and see whether or not I can get that threaded on under the car. Well, I have to say that banjo bolt was a real pain in the neck to get undone and to try and get it back in. Didn't enjoy that at all. and obviously trying to make sure I didn't contaminate anything on the bolt when I'm putting it back in the hole. So that was not a pleasant experience. In terms of the other end of the oil feed pipe, you can see there the Torx head and the new brass sort of dual washer, if you like, that goes either side of the head of the oil feed pipe. And then before I put that bolt in there, I did my best to prime the turbo with some oil as per the Garrett instructions, but it's very difficult to get any oil in there because it tends to just want to leak straight back out the hole again. But I did my best for that. So that's been torqued up, and the last bit this evening has been to put the EGR valve and cooler back on, or at least the basics of it, and I shall continue tomorrow. So the rebuild continues. I've got the cam cover PCV valve cover, what do you describe it, back on. The bracket for the conduit along the back, and the wires plugged back into that. Common rail back on. Down the back I've got the exhaust heat shield back on. All the diesel connector pipes reconnected, and the EGR to throttle body pipe is on as well. Just before I drop this conduit back down, you recall from my earlier video I was worried about where this had burnt through or melted through. So the wires look fine. I'm going to put some insulation tape around that initially, and then I've bought myself some extra conduit which I'm going to cable tie around that section just to make sure I haven't got a problem in the future. So that's with that repair complete. Just ran it between this clip here and the where this section of wire comes out for the various sensors. I can now drop that down the back of the engine. I suspect the reason it came in contact with the I think it was the one of the EGR pipes is that this clip wasn't attached to the engine block, so I just need to make sure that's secured when I reinstall. So looking from below with that cable wiring loom installed, you can see the EGR pipe with the sort of mesh covering, if you like. That's what that cable got in contact with, and you'll see just below, I'll circle it, the clip that should have held that onto the, I think this is like, it's the cam belt cover. That I don't think was clipped at the time, and there are various other clips as you come down that wiring loom, so just probably worth double checking those, because if you had a garage do your timing belt, it's possible they may not have clipped things back on.
So I'm pleased to report mission accomplished in terms of the final steps of the process. It's important to ensure obviously that the turbo is charged with oil before you start the engine. So once I'd finished the rebuild, I disconnected the crankshaft position sensor to ensure the car wouldn't actually fire, and I then turned the engine over on the start button until the oil warning light went out, which obviously then confirms that the oil pressure has reached at the required level. I then switched it off and then did that, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. I then replaced the crankshaft position sensor and then tried to start the car in earnest. Unfortunately, it still wouldn't start, and that was to do with the fact that because I'd taken off the common rail, there was, despite my attempts to bleed it, there was still some air in the diesel system. So I had to turn it over quite a few more times after that before eventually fired. I then left the engine idling for 5 or 6 minutes. The Garrett instructions suggest 3 or 4 as a minimum, just to make sure the oil is circulating nicely. And then took the vehicle out for a test drive. And I'm very pleased to report that the various noises that I was experiencing, the fluttering, the wandering of revs, also the other thing I was experiencing was a whining, particularly when the engine was cold in the morning as you pulled away.
and you could also hear that whine through the exhaust tailpipe as well. So all those issues have gone, which is great. So that's all very positive. The other thing you need to do as well is an oil change. They recommend an oil change as part of this process, and oil and filter. So that was done as well before attempting to starter. So yeah, all good. I think I'll just give you one more shot from below before I wrap this one up. So final view from underneath the car. Turbo obviously centre shot. I've left the engine under tray off for a few days while I've driven it around for a couple of 100 miles, just to then recheck, make sure there are no leaks. I thought there was a slight one from the oil return pipe at the bottom, but I gave that a slight tweak up, and all been well since. So good news in that respect. So I'm happily put the under tray back on now and call that a wrap, hopefully. So hope this video is useful to you if you decide to tackle a turbo issue. It's a bit of a laborious process, particularly trying to get that banjo bolt out, but obviously saves yourself a few bob in labour if you can tackle it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe and share, and we'll see what the next video is in a month or two's time.